Welcome, bakers. Welcome to today's episode of the Dough Doctor. I am your host and baking expert, Chef Colette, and we have a great show. I have a great show planned for you, and let's get started. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And today, first off, what I'm going to do is I want to give a shout out to the bakers who tagged me in their posts. And please, bakers, tag me in your posts because I love to see your beautiful bakes. And Sweetness Cake Bakery sent a photo of some gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous madeleines she had baked, and I have to apologize. That was actually about 10 days ago, and I'm just mentioning it now, so I apologize for the delay. And I also want to say I totally missed you last week, and I was sorry I had to not do the show, but we're back this week, and we're back strong. And then DoughDr posted some beautiful first batch croissants, gorgeous right out of the gate, wonderful bake, really well done, excellent work. So those are our bakers for this week. And then what I'd like to do today, we're still talking about bread. And bakers, I have a question for you. Are you noticing egg prices going down? Are they dropping? Are the egg prices dropping where you are? Are they staying the same, or are they going up? I'd like to get a barometer of how we're doing with egg prices, because we've been working on breads ever since January to kind of avoid using a ton of eggs because they've just been so expensive. I've noticed a small drop in prices here in Los Angeles, but let me know how it is where you are. Before I go much further, to kind of piggyback onto the bread idea, we're doing bread today. And today I'm going to demo how to make the whole grain power loaf. And there are a few bakers in the audience, or maybe they'll be watching on the archive, who already make this loaf or a version of it because they're my Escoffier plant-based baking students. This is a loaf that sort of grew out of that program, and I swear to God, it's one of my food groups. And once you start making it, as I said in yesterday's call for questions, you aren't going to stop, especially if you want to bring a little extra boost of health and wellness into your diet. But before I go much further and dive into our questions, I have a loaf in the proof box, and it needs to go in the oven, so I want to show you what this loaf looks like when it's ready to proof. And it's actually a perfect example of when we're making a pan bread, what that proof should look like. Oh, and bakers, I'm using a new camera, so I'm hoping framing, everything looks good. It's a little bit small to read, but I'm gonna make it work. Okay. Look at this. Isn't this gorgeous? So this is the whole wheat grain power loaf, and it has sunflower seeds in it because sunflower seeds have linolenic or linolenic, or I don't know how to say it, but they have an acid in them that make them really beneficial for heart health. So it's good to use them in our bakes when we can. And you can see that this is about a 1/2 inch over the top of the pan, and we're ready to bake. Now, one thing that's important when we bake a loaf bread, and the oven is at 400 degrees, because we want a nice burst of heat for this loaf, and it's important that it goes on a baking tray. We don't want to just put it on the oven rack, because that'll cause the sides and the bottoms to over brown before the center of the bread is fully baked. So I'm going to put it on a pan, and I'm going to put it in the preheated oven, and it's in the middle low part of the oven. It's one slot below middle. I don't always bake in the middle of the oven. I manipulate where I put my product in the oven for best results, and that's a trick and a tip I want to pass on to you. And we have to set a timer. And hopefully, maybe it'll come out of the oven just as we're finishing up the show. So just to recap, the whole grain power loaf, and this pretty much goes for any pan loaf you do. You're looking for a 1/2 inch over the top of the pan. You saw it had a nice light marshmallow texture, and it was fully expanded. Now there was no need to really slash it because it's supported by the pan. And one last thing, what's really important, bakers, is when the dough goes in the pan, you press it down into the sides and the corners. Don't worry, you won't hurt it. Just press it into the sides and the corners and then let it rise. So 32 minutes, and we'll give it a look. Hopefully we'll still be together when that timer rings. So let me check for questions. And, oh good, BB Cabs, egg prices have dropped where you are. Excellent. And then, hello from Michigan. Now, you guys, I apologize, but sometimes I get requests for a live video, and I have yet to really master that technology with Instagram Live. So if you have a question, drop it in the comments. I'm working on getting more proficient with IG Live technology. I promise I'll get there. All right, so we started with a little bit about the bread that I'm demoing today. Now I'd like to return to the premise of the show, which is answering your questions. So if you have questions, drop them in the comments below. We had some, anytime we take a break, bakers, I notice that two things happen. Either I get a ton of questions, or the wind goes out of our sails a little bit and I get very few questions. This was a light question week, so, but they were great questions. The first question that came in from one of our bakers was, what is the difference between whole wheat flour and whole wheat pastry flour? And yesterday I was in my local Whole Foods, and I was standing in the baking aisle, and there they were. There was a bag of whole wheat flour and a bag of whole wheat pastry flour. And, what is the difference between the two? Well, I have to apologize. I don't have any whole wheat pastry flour on hand, but I did buy a small bag of organic whole wheat flour. So the difference between the two is the type of wheat that's been milled. So there are 6,000 strains of wheat currently being grown throughout the world. I won't talk about all of them, I promise. I probably could, but I won't. So just know that when you're buying a pastry flour or a cake flour, the strain of wheat is softer. It is going to result in a flour with a lower protein content. A big factor in determining the end result of wheat after it's grown is the climate that it's grown in. If it's grown in a moderate climate, like the southern part of the United States, or France or Italy, it's going to yield a softer grain because there's more moisture. A wheat that's grown in a harsh climate, like Saskatchewan, Minnesota, Crimea, Siberia, that's going to be a harder wheat. There's going to be more protein in that wheat, and we're going to use it for our breads, whereas our pastry flour is more suitable for cookies, tarts, pies, and muffins. So that's the difference. They are not interchangeable. They do share something very common. This one I haven't opened yet, But once your whole wheat flours, whether they're your whole wheat pastry flour or your regular whole wheat flour, once you open that bag, you want to store them in the freezer because they're the whole grain as opposed to all-purpose and bread flour, which are the center of the grain that's been milled. And that whole grain with the wheat, with the germ and the bran, especially the germ, ground up in there, like that, just like that, can cause the wheat to go rancid after about 6 months of room temperature storage. So now you know. So let me just do a quick check. No, we're good on questions. Okay, so my next question came in from our baker, Leo, from Italy. And Leo, she's actually been posting some photos of gorgeous violets in her garden. And she sent a post saying, I've been trying to candy them and been having not good results. So that is something I need to do a little bit of research on. So we're going to put a pin in answering that question, and I'm going to figure out the best way to candy violets for your cakes and pastries. One thing about flowers, whether we're going to crystallize or candy flowers, they are so beautiful. We have to make sure they are edible. So that's something to look up before you start the process. And more about that when I get it figured out, and I'll have a little demo for you guys. That'll be a fun demo, how to candy or crystallize edible flowers. All right. The last question came from our baker, Lydia. And Lydia had this great question, and I promise I won't go down the rabbit hole with it, but I could. So Lydia asked about, why do chefs use wooden spoons? Yeah, why do they use wooden spoons? As I turn around and grab my wooden spoons from my tool crock that's behind me. Well, chefs and passionate cooks use wooden spoons for several reasons. I mean, we have all kinds of plastics available to us. We have plastics that can withstand really high heat. So why, and we can potentially, well, I don't recommend it, but you could put them in the dishwasher, like tons of possibilities, right? But why is this still so romantic? So let me tell you why. So wooden spoons are naturally heat resistant. So they handle any heat, any pot of sauce, anything you're stirring, that batch of pâte à choux, lemon curd, pastry cream, whatever we're doing, they can handle the heat. Also, you can use them with acidic foods. Now you have to watch metal utensils because they can be a problem when we're stirring a tomato sauce or making a sauce that has a lot of vinegar or acid in it. They're great for canning when you're stirring your strawberry jam or your mango chutney. You really, really want to be using a wooden spoon. And they're also works of art. Now these two that I'm holding up, this one's really pretty. This one has a story because I always have a story. But they can be just absolutely gorgeous. And I would say in the past, 5 years, I noticed it when I was still at Sur La Table, that some gorgeous olive wood utensils being made. And so, you can just have just works of art in your tool crock, and you get to use them every day, and there's just so much joy in using beautiful tools. So that's another thing about wooden spoons. And, they're produced with natural materials. There's nothing synthetic about a wooden spoon. No rogue bad chemicals were used in their production. They're completely natural. And on the flip side of that, if you ever have to retire or get rid of your wooden spoons, they're just going to break down naturally and go back into the environment in a sweet and gentle way. And then also, contrary to popular belief, They do not harbor bacteria. In general, bacteria doesn't like to grow on wood. I mean, if you really worked at it, you could probably get bacteria to grow on wood, but in general, it's not a good home for bacteria. So if your wooden tools are washed in hot soapy water, rinsed in hot water, and then air dried, they are perfectly safe. And ditto for your wooden cutting boards as well. So in fact, plastic has a tendency, is a better home for bacterial growth than wood. Much better home for bacterial growth than wood. Your wooden tools should never, ever, ever go in the dishwasher. Ever, ever, ever. And so, and some woods, and I know for a fact bamboo, which is not really a wood, but there are some woods that are antimicrobial, just naturally, besides their natural tendency to be antimicrobial. And then that's about it. They're just an absolutely positive force of nature. They get the job done. They're beautiful to use. They feel good in your hand. There's a warmth about them. You may even have spoons that you've handed down from friends and family, that, you know, from family members, and you have that connection, which is awesome. And just to piggyback on that, this kind of funny, sad wooden spoon, look at that burn mark. Isn't that hilarious? This came from a bucket of jam. A big bucket of jam. When I was working at the Westin Hotel in Chicago, I was working as actually not in the pastry kitchen, not all the time. I divided my time between the main kitchen, working the grill, and the pastry kitchen. And the jam buckets always had these wooden spoons with taped to the lid so you could dig the jam out. And I kept this one. And that was a few decades ago. And I use this silly free spoon, you know, every day. And I think about all the friends and the good times I had working in that hotel. So that's it. Wooden spoons. Lydia, thank you. All right. So that's it for questions. One last thing, because there's always one last thing. Our baker Tina asked for a tour of my kitchen and sort of how I organize things in this teeny tiny space. And I just wanted to say I'm working on that, so I'll have a nice video for you guys. Soon. All right, let me check for questions. Oh, PLZW, my dad is a wheat farmer, born and raised in Saskatchewan. Awesome. Really beautiful wheat grown in that part of the world. Awesome. Okay, great. See? I love it. Okay, now I'm going to show you, we're going to switch gears and I'm going to show you how to mix the whole grain power loaf. All right? And I've been thinking, you know, I'm working on the book, and I've been thinking a lot about mixing, and especially since we've been sort of, you know, dealing with the egg prices and working on this section of baking, because it's a little bit more cost efficient, and it also really gives you a great foundation for your breads, working with the different levels of hydration. So it's a win. This is all a win. But I will be switching gears soon. And as a matter of fact, before I go into demo, I have a question for you bakers. For next week, I don't know how many Ted Lasso fans are in this audience, but Ted Lasso Season 3 will be premiering. And we know that shortbread, those of you who watch the show, shortbread plays an important part in Ted Lasso. So I have a question. I had planned to do a focaccia demo to close out our bread series, but if you would like a shortbread demo, put it in the comments. So Ted Lasso fans, let me know and I'll just rearrange things a little bit and we'll make shortbread as good, I promise you, as good as Ted's. So put it in the comments. All right, and then we'll finish up with focaccia the following week. Or if you're like, meh, on shortbread, I'll just power through with focaccia. But I thought that the shortbread might be fun. Ooh, Patty says shortbread. So keep the conversation going. Drop it in the comments. Focaccia, shortbread. Focaccia, shortbread. All right. Okay, now, deep yoga breath. We are going to reset. And this whole grain power loaf, I swear, it's one of my food groups. I make it at least once a week. And as you're just not going to stop. And I don't know if our baker, Andrea, is in the audience, but I know she bakes it at least once a week because she always sends me pictures of her beautiful loaves. So here's the thing about this loaf. It combines whole wheat flour, and if you're able to get sprouted whole wheat flour, you can use that. It uses ground flax seeds, and just a note about flax seeds, bakers, you want for maximum nutrition, they have to be ground. They're not nearly as packed with nutrition when they are whole. They make a pretty garnish, but they're not giving you the great B vitamins and nutrients as when they are ground up. So make sure you source ground flaxseed. I tried to grind my own. What a pain in the patootie. Oh, my coffee grinder was like, no! So buy your flax seeds ground. And then the aforementioned sunflower seeds. Now, it's not all whole wheat flour, because if it was, it would be a doorstop, and we would use it to hold up the door. So it's got part whole wheat flour, these luscious grains, oatmeal, and then some bread flour to lighten it and make it just yummy, light, and delicious. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to move. I really have this kitchen rigged. If I move the camera and show you how I did this production, you guys would crack up. So I do have the glass bowl mixer, and in the mixer bowl, whenever we bake, and my camera, ooh, okay, great, okay. I have the glass mixer bowl, and in it I have the oatmeal and warm water. They've been soaking for about 20 minutes. I set this up a few minutes before I went live. And we want to, one thing about oatmeal and many whole grains, we want to soak them before we mix our bread dough. If we don't, they're going to want to hydrate because that's what they do. And if they're not pre-soaked, they're going to grab moisture from our dough, and the resulting loaf will not be very nice at all. So we've soaked the oatmeal, and I have my mise en place behind me. So we're going to add the yeast, and going to take my wooden spoon because it's right here. And we would let this in the directions, which are already typed and ready to be posted bright and early Monday morning. The recipe will be on the website at bakingwithcolette.com. And let me know, are you finding the companion recipes easily? And does that Monday post help you find them? And is it a good reminder that, oh God, I got to get the recipe to make what we made on Saturday? Please put that in the comments. Let me know. Okay, so the yeast would go sit for about 5 minutes so that it can hydrate. We're going to speed it up for demo purposes because that's demo. And I'm going to add a little bit of milk. Because the water is warm, you know, we want to soften the oats. So the recommended water temperature is 90 for these 20 minutes. And that's very clear on the instructions. I didn't warm up the milk. The milk is just cool, and that's fine. because I really don't want to hydrate my yeast in water that's too warm. If that happens, what the end result can be using water that's too warm is it can compromise the crumb structure of your finished loaf. So now you know, so watch those temperatures. I'm going to go ahead and I'm adding honey, but you may prefer agave, which is a lower glycemic sweetener than honey. You know, if we're really thinking health and wellness, you can use a plant-based milk. I often use almond. You can even use brown rice syrup or maple syrup if that's what you have. So you can tailor this. Ground flax seeds going in, whole wheat flour, sunflower seeds. They are not toasted, but if toasted are your jam, you can get toasted. And then flour and salt. So here's the thing, bakers. I've been working, I've been trying to work an hour a day writing the book to get it to the point where I can get a literary agent to represent me so I get to a legit publisher. So I'm just going to shout it out, bakers. If anybody knows a literary agent who handles cookbooks, DM me please, because this cookbook is going to be amazing. Anyway, so back to the bread chapter. I'm having really good luck with this technique. It's a little rogue, but it's working, where we start mixing on speed 2 for the first couple minutes to make sure that everything catches, and then we go down to a lower speed to finish off the kneading. Whoops, I forgot to plug in the mixer. See, this is, that's okay. It's always something, bakers. So just a little bit faster mix. And while it's mixing, thank God it's not so loud and you can still hear me. The one thing I really want to get across when we're making yeasted doughs is the dough hook is not designed to go much faster than speed 3. What happens is, and so like 2 is as fast as we want to go with the dough hook. If we go fast with the dough hook, it's going to begin to tear the gluten we've developed in our dough, and that's the last thing we want to use. But the benefit of just speeding it up a titch, 9 times out of 10, when you're directed to make a yeasted loaf in a KitchenAid in a stand mixer, it tells you start on low speed. But I've been really thinking about this, and this little bit faster. Look at it. You can see it in the corner of the screen. It's already at cleanup. And I would definitely, if I wasn't yammering on, I would set a timer. So 3 minutes at cleanup, 3 minutes on speed 2. It'll get to clean up quickly, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it down to speed 1 for 3 minutes. And there's something miraculous that happens. It begins to kind of look a little bit rough around the edges, and then in that second mix, it's going to transform for us. It's really, really interesting. That was about 3 minutes. And I'm going to turn it down to low speed. And I'm going to turn my timer. Well, I can't turn my timer on, but I have my watch here. So that's the dough hook. And what I wanted to tell you is that those of you who have a stand mixer, and a few weeks ago you told me the colors of your stand mixer, and several of you had named your mixer. I think there was a jack in there. I should have written them down. I haven't, this one is the silver, this mixer is my Silver Surfer, and then the other plain white mixer, I haven't quite named her yet. So anyway, I'm behind on the naming, but this one is the Silver Surfer. Anyhow, just really quickly, those of you with stand mixers that have the dough hook, the paddle, and the whisk, here's their speed range. The dough hook, 0 to 3, the paddle, 3 to 8, and the whisk, 4 to high, whatever that is for your mixer. Because the whisk is, so let's go backward. The whisk is designed to be in air. The paddle is designed for creaming method to help sugar cut air pockets into fat and get things light and fluffy and to combine. And the dough hook is specifically for yeasted doughs. And it is absolutely transformed. Whoops. Look at this, bakers. It's clearing. This is where it's almost done. We're at a minute more of mixing. Look at this beautiful mix. It's like, now one thing you should do, I don't like the word should, it's very, it's not really great, but one thing that's helpful, when your dough is just rolling around on the hook, stop and dig it off, because really the action that's ideal doesn't always happen, but what's ideal is that the dough is being worked on the side of the bowl. That action mimics hand kneading. So that's what we're looking for. So we have a really beautiful dough. And the other thing about the whole grain loaf, bakers, it's going to be stickier. So you may feel that it feels a little weird, but what I'm going to ask you to do is just lightly flour your hands. And I'm also going to show you another technique with sticky doughs that's kind of awesome. And when we do our focaccia lesson, we're going to even go deeper into it. So let me make sure you can see, but I want you to be able to see the work surface right here. I'm going to center my dough board so you guys can see. Quick recap. We soaked the oats for 20 minutes. We added the rest of the ingredients. We hydrated the yeast for a couple minutes before we added the rest of the ingredients. You can use instant or active dry, that's fine. Then we mixed for 3 minutes on speed 2. We reduced the speed to speed 1 for an additional 3 minutes. And when the dough climbed up the hook, we stopped and we freed it so it could be worked on the side of the bowl. So I want to show you what we have here, because oatmeal in particular has Pitocin gums, and that's what makes it so rich and creamy. Well, and sticky, right? Just think of the oatmeal pot, right? There's a lot of stickiness there. So you're going to notice that a dough like this it's a little bit on the sticky side. So you have some choice here, and this is hydrated in the low 60s, all right? But for my passionate bread bakers, you've got to absolutely have your spray bottle close by. You can super lightly mist your work surface, and then you can also just dust flour on your hands. And this has had a good mix. It has really nice development, but you might want to kind of work it a little bit, give it a little bit of you, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of love. Remember, yeast is alive. It's just like us. We're alive. And it needs the same things that we need to grow and thrive. It needs warmth, it needs moisture, it needs some attention, and it needs the last one. It'll come to me in a second. I get so much going on in my head. So what we want to do, if you want, you can just, oxygen, needs oxygen. You can just knead it just for about 30 seconds to get some good surface tension and round it. And then you can put it in a lightly oiled bowl, or very lightly sprayed, and you're going to cover the top of the bowl with plastic wrap, or maybe you have a proofing bucket. That's even better, like a plastic bucket you proof your breads in. And then what you're going to do is you're going to it's going to take between 60 and 75 minutes at room temperature to double in volume. And then you're going to shape it and put it into the bread pan. And you're going to remember to press everything into the sides and the corners, and then you're going to let it come up to a ½ inch above the top of the pan. So bakers, that's it. Look at this beautiful power loaf. So yummy, so delicious. And we are 1 minute away. So before I end the show, I can show you what this gorgeous bread looks like. He will form a skin, and that's what we don't want. Let me grab my oven mitts. I still haven't replaced them. Oh my God, they're so sad. I told you, bakers, I'm gonna start a GoFundMe. So there we go, bakers. Now it's full of whole grains. We're not going to get a crazy farmhouse sort of, those farmhouse white loaves where they're really puffy, or like potato bread sometimes does that. But we get a solid loaf that makes excellent toast, excellent sandwiches. I just take a slice and spread it with hummus, and it is just a wonderful protein-packed snack. So here it is, the gift of health from today's show. And it looks like, before I say goodbye, I'm going to see Pistol Packing Mama. That is a great question. So I would say, yeah, I've got more, shortbreads. It's shortbreads. So what we're going to do, there is wet dough weight, and that's the weight of the dough that we scale after it's doubled in size. And then there's the weight after the loaf or the roll or whatever it is has been baked. And on average, it'll be 2 ounces less than whatever the wet dough weight was, because there's the excess moisture bakes out. So like, for example, this loaf right now out of the oven weighs 1 pound, 12 ounces. And as a matter of fact, bakers, I have one last trick to tell you about with your yeasted doughs. Number 1, I would recommend flipping them over, especially the first time. We want this to register, to flip it over, take an instant read thermometer. It should register 210 on the thermometer, but at least 205. And then I'm indebted to my colleague and dear friend, the Dough Ho. She has this amazing trick. You can follow her on IG too as well. She has this trick of, we turn off when our loaves are done, right? They are done. What you do is you turn off the oven, you return the loaf, and I didn't put it back in the pan, I just slid it on the rack for 5 timed minutes. And what that does with a sturdy, heavy loaf of bread is it bakes out the excess moisture. Not the moisture, it's not going to dry it out. But if you've ever baked bread and let it cool and cut into it and there was a slight dampness, and I'm talking, slight, like, is this holding on to excess moisture? If you've ever had that thought, the answer is yes. This is a great way to eliminate that. 5 timed minutes, then take it out, cool it on a wire rack, and this big loaf of bread will not be suitable for cutting into for at least an hour. Hour and a half would be better. Otherwise, there's going to be a rush of steam and the crumb, the inside, will be compromised. It freezes beautifully. I pre-slice it. Once it's fully cool, wrap it up and throw it in the freezer. And that way I can take out exactly what I need, and you can too. All right, everyone, one last check for questions. Thank you so much. And then my website is DoughDr. It is bakingwithcolette.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you enjoyed the show, everyone. Such a pleasure to be with you on Saturdays. Now, get back to your kitchens and start baking, and I'll see you next Saturday right here at noon Pacific. Bye!